when you're just waiting. There it goes.
We're live!
Hello.
All right. This is my channel. Hello, I'm Cassie. If you're new here, click that subscribe button. We're live! Oh no. Hello. That's me.
I also forgot to mute us. Please.
So this is the live show for Little in Line by Brandy Colbert, and my internet is really bad, so if I start glitching, Chelsea will take the reins.
I will indeed.
On my channel, because she's the best. But we'll be discussing this book for Sassy Book Club. This was the book for February. The book for March is, Chelsea, do you have it?
Yes. It's all the way over there.
Then don't worry about it. The March book is going to be The Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch.
Cassie really went glitchy right there. It's going to be The Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch.
It's going to be tag teaming it.
You can go back in, Cassie.
Okay. We're going to be reading it, and the live show will probably be the last weekend of March, but we don't have a set date and time yet. So make sure you're following Sassy Book Club on Twitter, as well as everybody here in this live show, who are all linked down below for YouTube. Chelsea's also linked like 4 different times because she's a co-host. So you can definitely find all those there.
Me.
Yeah. How did you guys like the book? We'll start out with non-spoilery discussion, and then we'll eventually go into how we really feel.
Let's everyone introduce themselves too.
Oh, duh. Sorry. I got excited.
Well, hello. I'm Chelsea, co-host of the Sassy Book Club. My channel is Chelsea Darling Reads. Good to see ya.
I'm Rhiannon. I'm from the booktube channel Crescent Moon Reads. Really nice to be here. Thanks for having me again.
We love ya.
You're the best.
And I'm Hailey from the channel Hailey's Book Nook, and this is my first live show, so I really appreciate you guys, taking a chance with this noob and having me on.
We love ya. And you cute ass baby.
Don't be too nervous. Just talk like you're talking to normal people, because who cares about the other? Just kidding. We like the watchers.
We're normal. Just pretend we're normal and then talk to us like we're normal.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so now Little in Lion. Non-spoiler thoughts. How did you guys rate it? I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked it. There were parts of it that felt very much like this is a teenage rom-com. And then there were other parts that were like really raw, and I really, really enjoyed reading that part.
This was a reread for me. The first time I read it, I gave it 5 stars because it has some very, very personal aspects to me. This time I actually lowered my rating down to a 4. I still really liked it, but it's definitely not without its problems, I'll say.
I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars, but my Goodreads rating is 3 because no half stars. Love that. And it's probably the first time I've ever given a half star, but I felt like I needed to make that distinction because I really liked it for the most part, and there were a lot of aspects of the story that really resonated with me and that I think were really well done. There was a lot of diversity and rep in here that was deeply personal to me on many different levels that I don't normally see in one novel, which is really nice when you can see so many aspects of yourself in the same novel. But at the same time, and I don't want to be spoilery, so I'll just be vague for now, there was one aspect of my identity that was reflected in this book that I felt could have been handled better, and it is an aspect of the story that is not own voices, and I could tell because of the way it wasn't very nuanced, and we'll get into that. But yeah, that's it.
I also ended up giving this like a 3 and a 3.5 star. I thought that a lot of it, like the diversity, I felt like it flowed very easily. I felt like it just felt like real life. You know what I mean? There were so many different people from different backgrounds and sexualities, which I enjoyed a lot. But yeah, I do feel like there was a lot of stuff with the sexuality that also, like, you could sort of tell that it felt like, I don't know, it just felt like kind of staged almost, or sort of like, maybe not staged, but more just like it was written for maybe teenagers that need sort of like a black and white picture on the way they could be feeling, which I didn't really enjoy. But I mean, everything else felt realistic. There was a lot of stuff with the mental health that bothered me a lot. But I still felt like, I mean, these are kids, so you know what I mean? So, but just for that.
It's interesting that you say that, because last month I read Finding Yvonne by Brandy Colbert as well. Brandy Colbert. I need to need that into myself. I very much feel like she writes books. Like, how do I put this? Like, she writes them very, very teenagery. Like, like instead of just being a little more natural and like maybe letting them make more adult decisions, she's like, let me pick the most teenagery dramatic decisions I can pick and make them do those things. And like, it is like some of the decisions like are definitely things I would have done as a teen, but it's also like maybe like give them a little more maturity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially for things that are in the book. Like, they're doing a lot of things that would kind of, I feel like they are doing a lot of things mature teenagers do, while at the same time, like, not always fully exhibiting that.
Yeah.
Are there any trigger warnings that you guys would say for this book for people who are thinking about picking it up?
Absolutely, yes.
What would you say?
Take it away.
Take it away.
I would give trigger warnings just like for people who have bipolar. If you're easily triggered, like I'm not easily triggered, so it takes a lot. I've said this before, the only time I've ever been triggered was by an episode of Shameless. But if you are easily triggered by like reading about episodes, reading about someone who's in the midst of an episode, then I would be very careful, because there is graphic episodic behavior in the book, and also homophobia. And what else?
Like racism.
Yeah. That scene. Yeah. Pretty much a little bit of the gambit.
I can't tell if Cassie's frozen or just sitting really still. I'm gonna say frozen.
You didn't catch a lot of what you said, so I was kind of just staring.
Well, I was saying I can't tell if Cassie's frozen or just sitting really still.
Yeah, I could have been frozen, because for a lot of what Rhiannon just said was not heard by me.
Well, let me tell you, it was great.
Yeah, I like got the gist, and I was like sad that I missed the amazing parts.
I'm winning an Oscar for this speech. How did you miss it?
I'm gonna have to rewatch. Yeah, I don't know if I would have any specific trigger warnings in my head, but I knew that there would be people who saw, Rhiannon. I was really excited to hear a lot of Rhiannon's thoughts in this.
I'm very very excited to hear what you're willing to bestow upon us. Do you want to hop into spoilers? I mean, there's not really much else to say that's not spoilery. You look like you're dubious of this.
Me?
Yes.
I just couldn't hear what you were saying.
I said, do you want to go into spoilers?
Yeah,
and you're frozen again. This is probably going to be a short live show, guys.
This is the theme of the night. Okay, so spoilers?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to be assertive. Spoiler time.
So, do we want to start at I'll probably monologue for a minute when I get started on this topic, so I don't want to just like...
Well, why don't we didn't really do a synopsis, so I guess I'll do a quick, synopsis, and then we'll dive into, because I want to hear your thoughts is why we're here. Basically, Little and Lion is about these siblings. They're the product of both of their parents are divorced, and they are together now. And so they're step siblings, but their parents aren't married, but step siblings for all intents and purposes. Suzette Little is black. Lionel is white. Suzette is like not coming to terms, but like discovering that she may be bisexual. She's Jewish. She's fantastic. This book takes place in my hometown. Makes me very happy. Lion is dealing with bipolar disorder throughout the whole book. There is a love triangle between the two of them and another girl. That's kind of all you need to know. That was a terrible synopsis, but like that's pretty much all you need to know. There's not a ton of plot to this. It's slice of lifey.
Yes. There's also is he Korean?
Oh, correct.
The other love interest?
Yes.
And black, right?
Yeah, with a French
Korean.
No. Oh, is he mixed?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's Korean and black.
Oh, Cassie.
Oh, okay. Because I was listening to the audiobook, and I black boy. Like, he's assuming he was black. And then he mentioned something about being Korean, and I was like, wait, what? Like, did I completely miss something? But it's because I missed the mixed race. Okay.
Yes.
So his dad is Korean, and his mom is black.
Yeah.
Got
Emile Choi.
And he has Meniere?
I don't remember.
It's a inner ear disease, which I thought was also an interesting thing to include.
Yeah,
We
this
had
book,
one thing about diversity.
Yeah.
she really packs a lot into her books, Brandy Colbert does.
Yeah.
I think that
One
was
thing I will say
sorry.
about the hard of hearing rep is that I don't personally know of any hearing aids that are waterproof. And so that scene where they're in the pool and he's wearing your hearing aids really bothered me because I don't know everything because I'm not personally hard of hearing, but like I know a lot of information about hearing aids and stuff like that. And that doesn't exist that I know of. And so he would have to take those out.
So it just seems convenient that like
Yeah, it was a very convenient plot point. I was just like, really? Like, either go full force and do it and like talk about the struggle that he has with being in a pool situation or leave that rep out. I don't know. I don't know which is better. Like, do you leave the rep out or do you keep it in, but it's not perfect?
I just Googled it, and there are not waterproof hearing aids.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was
And if
like
you-
98% sure that I was right about that.
if he hadn't had that scene where he was sick because of the like almost vertigo-like symptoms it gives him, it would have been almost like non-existent other than, oh, I have this thing and I have hearing aids. So without that other scene, there would have been literally no aspect of his character that was actually dealing with it. So like that would have been another opportunity for it to be realistic, for him to have to take it out. And then that scene would have had more complications, and that already is one of the tougher scenes in the book, because he may not have heard and would have wondered what happened, or like, you know, various things could have happened. And so like, you know, he would have had a struggle that would have been unique to him, and it would have been more realistic. Yeah. I didn't know that. I didn't know there weren't waterproof ones. So knowing that, I'm like,
yeah, they don't exist. And I was also like a little bit disappointed that we had a hard of hearing character, but like they didn't talk at all about how hearing aids they don't fix everything. Like, I mean, I don't know what spectrum of hearing loss he has. She doesn't go into that kind of detail with this character, because there's a whole spectrum of like very little hearing loss all the way to full deaf, you can't hear a thing. And hard of hearing is anywhere on the more hearing side of that big spectrum. So like, I don't know how much hearing loss he has, but it would have been really interesting adjusting to scenes where he still misses stuff, or that the hearing aids are bothering him, because a lot of people with hearing aids will complain about because it amplifies everything. It doesn't only amplify a voice. So like if you're in a crowded room, you're going to hear all of the crowded room amplified. And so a lot of times in situations like that, like a party, a high school party, that would bother him if he needs hearing aids. So like just scenes like that where I was a little bit sad that she didn't bring it up. And so oftentimes I forgot he even had a hearing loss. And so I was a little bit sad. But that was my big.
Like twice. The actual hearing aids themselves were mentioned maybe twice. And that's the thing about, like, I like that it was realistic with the amount of representation that was in it, because obviously it's not unrealistic to have all of these characters in this span of, but the thing is when you're trying to like describe them and you want to give them their due, if you kind of like try to like half explain all of them in a short contemporary novel, you end up not doing justice to a lot of them. And I think that's what happened with that. It's like no one doesn't want that diversity. It's just if you're going to make it a point in your novel, you're gonna have to give it right attention it deserves, and so I don't know. Yeah. Especially like that's an easy thing to look up. Are there any waterproof hearing aids? No. Okay. Well, then I can't have them like in my novel.
Yeah. Or like have them and make that. I understand that scene already has a very important part in it. Like it was very clear that she wrote that scene for this moment of the racist comment and then all of the backlash that the dumb girl gets and how everyone kind of reacts to that. Did I freeze?
No.
You're good.
Okay. All right. Everyone looked really still.
Oh, I was just listening
You're all
to
getting
you.
very somber about dumb racist girls.
Yeah. So like that scene is important enough. So I mean, I think it could have been detrimental to include that kind of rep in that particular scene, but she also could have moved that important race conversation to a different party and done the water in that way if she wanted to include that rep. I don't know.
I think that was because they needed him to sort of say that to bring them together, which is what I didn't like.
Yeah.
Because it was like we set them up to now get close over this dumbass saying some super racist shit, and then it just never comes up again. Well, it does, but it's like just for Dee Dee to tell her, well, I mean, you're not really still mad, right? I mean, she didn't mean it. And she's like, yeah, I guess people do just fuck up sometimes.
Oh, I hated that scene.
Like, I was like...
So frustrating.
That scene was the worst.
Took that out. We could have just took that whole conversation with Dee out then. Like, we didn't need...
Because her friend needed to be called out way more than she was. Like, you don't get to take this side... And she kind of does. She's like, yeah, but you're my best friend, so you needed to take my side. And so, like, she does explain her point of, like, why she's mad at her friend Dee Dee.
Right. And she does, like, and Dee Dee apologizes, so it's better than nothing. It's not the best, but, like, you get that the characters know that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I guess that's true.
Why, like, bring it up again, though? That was the part that bothered me, is that then later on we have Dee Dee telling her, well, I mean, you're not so mad.
Yeah.
It was just, like, unnecessary. Like, we don't need Dee Dee to tell us that she didn't mean it. Thank you, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and isn't Brandy Colbert, like, I don't know. I was just like, wait, but you're... Okay.
Like, haven't you experienced this?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And I hate to say that, but I was still like, but she would, I mean, I guess if anybody could say it, it would be her, but still.
And I'm sure that she has experienced, I'm sure that she has experienced something along those lines where she has a friend who just doesn't get it. No, and then how do you navigate that?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think the issue was the repetitiveness, because they did that same conversation by
Right.
the pool immediately afterwards.
Right.
And so to do the same conversation again is just to kind of like hammer it in again, but there was no new development in that conversation.
It's
So
like we went back.
You don't need to have that unless they're gonna have like a new like revolution happen in that.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree.
How did you guys feel about the oh god, what was her name? The love interest that both of the brothers and the brother and the sister both like.
What was her name? I just read this yesterday.
Rafaela.
Yeah, Rafaela.
Is that? Oh, she's gone.
Oh.
She has left the chat.
Oh god. Well, yes, it's Rafaela.
No idea what. Sorry.
I liked her originally, and then I didn't like how her character was written in progression.
I agree.
Not like the weird, like, because we're all this whole time, you know, Suzette is struggling with the, you know, being bi, a lot of that having to do with how people will perceive her as a cheater and someone who like just can't decide and like stuff like that. But then we have this other character who's Pan, who, you know, it progresses into a character who functions to kind of push her to exhibit cheating behaviors, like climbing into bed with her and like sharing lipstick and saying like, I don't cheat.
I wouldn't do this, but
I was like, why are you having the other character in your story that has a, you know, is not monosexual exhibit those, you know, behaviors so blatantly? Which, like, there's something to be said for, you know, polysexual people are not immune to cheating behaviors. They're not immune to doing those things, just as no one else is. But when you're trying to subvert those stereotypes, you know, you don't want to bring that into the narrative when you're already doing so many other things with characters.
Yes.
That's the attention it needed for it to actually be like,
yeah.
you know, it just became like, oh, yikes.
I feel like this comes back to how Brandy Colbert like just writes messy ass teenagers. Like I think she overdoes the mess.
Yeah.
Like she tries to be so realistic by having like teenagers are messy characters. And I get it. I was a messy ass teenager. But that's not necessarily the way we need to portray our bi characters. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's weird because, okay, so I'm bi. I like to put that out there when talking about bi rep because I'm not talking about my ass. Yeah, okay. I didn't want to.
Pretty much everyone.
Yeah.
But
so for me, I don't mind a bi story that has cheating in it. There's this book called Cut Both Ways. It's all about this boy who's bisexual and he has a girlfriend and he's cheating on her with his best friend who's a boy. And like there's plot development there and all of that stuff, but that's the general story is all about him doing that. And like I love that book. It has a lot of hate on YouTube. It did when it came out because it's a bi rep book that's all about cheating and like that's a big stereotype. I personally liked it because I thought his mindset was really well done of like what he was doing and like his everything going on in his life.
we lost you a little bit.
This book didn't. Damn it.
Right at the good.
Yeah, right when you were about to get to it.
Basically, I think that book did a good job showing a bi character that is cheating.
Mm-hmm.
This book, I don't think did it right.
Yeah, no, it didn't, because it didn't really get any development, like enough attention for it to be done right. So like there's certain things that if you bring them up in your novel and you don't have enough time to fully flesh them out, then it's better if you just don't bring them up at all.
Right.
Because, you know, you don't want to throw that in there because then you're just using the stereotype versus
and on top,
you know, turning it on its head and like saying, okay, well, but how can this also function in this person because they're still a fully developed human person. And, you know, that goes beyond bisexual people having stereotypes about them. That's any stereotype, you know, like, of course, there is going to be someone of that race, religion, sexuality that does exhibit that stereotype. Like, that's hands down, that's gonna happen. But, you know, it's all about subverting that with the, you know, cutting down the generalization. And if you can't give it the time to do that clearly, then you need to not even broach it.
Yeah.
Like, ugh. Yikes.
I think that was her primary issue, though, in general, was that she had so much quantity that she just couldn't stretch the quality across all of the different elements she was adding in. And I honestly
agree 100%.
There were so many different things that just straight up didn't need to be in it, and we still could have got that full story. Like, I honestly didn't feel like the whole, like, gay bashing situation at school even needed to happen for the plot point of Rafaela and Emil and her struggle with that to have happened. Like,
I totally forgot that was a thing, and you're so right. That was just a whole extra level.
Like, we still could have had Iris and her love for her and them sort of separating and not knowing. She still could have had that with Emil without them having to be called dykes and shit. Like, it was just unnecessary pressure on the characters and the story. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just felt like that was, I mean, that happens, and I'm glad that that was sort of shown, like, for teenagers, like, hey, this could happen to you and it's still okay and you can still feel that way. That's fine. But I still felt like it was unnecessarily harsh when
and
you know?
I think on its own, like, if a lot of the story had revolved around that struggle, then it would have been fine, because on its own, it's not a bad thing to show in your novel. It's just combined with all of the other things she's trying to tackle in this novel, you start to have a bunch of things that are very intense, real issues that start to fall through the cracks when you can't spend enough time on them.
Right.
You know, it's just, you can't do everything in one novel. You can't show the whole world in its entirety in one YA contemporary novel. Like, you just do it. So, you know, there was a lot of that stuff that felt like it's not extraneous in that it's very important and it is a life thing, but it is extraneous in that it's too much for this narrative.
Right. Not enough of it's getting resolved in this one story. So then it gets brought up and you're like, whoa, like turmoil, I'm reading this, and then there's no feeling of resolution for it. And then you get another one and there's no, and it's just a regular, which, I mean, it does follow real life. Like, real life doesn't always have a nice little resolution following a really bad thing that happens to people, or even a bunch of different things that happen to one group of people that all happen to know each other. So, like, in that sense, I think Brandy really did a good job of showing real life, but just in novel format, a lot of people want to have some sort of resolution, and I don't think she gave enough of that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I did want to go back to the cheating thing real quick, because I have a comment on it. And I think what really bothered me about this particular story is that the brother and sister are involved in one big triangle square. Like, I don't know why that bothered me so much, but I was just like, no, there is a respect there. Like, go away from each other. What are you doing? They weren't trying to do each other, but, like, you know, I don't know. Unless you're, like, Chelsea's hiding her face because she's into that kink sometimes.
No, it's just I don't know what to reveal about myself on the internet is the problem. Maybe take from that what you will, but it's not as uncommon as you may think.
No, like, I'm not saying it's not uncommon, because, like, no, I know it happens and I know that it's normal, but, like,
wait, which kink?
No, I went somewhere that Chelsea wasn't going. I was talking about, like, a brother and a sister like the same person, or a sister and a sister like the same person. I think that's where Chelsea meant in real life.
Yes.
Oh, that was where my brain went.
Yes, that's where I was going, not sibling kink.
No.
Not just straight up incest.
Yeah, no incest. That's not what I meant.
Yeah, so, like, I'm not saying, I know that that's normal like with
You're
it
all
added on
broken
top
up.
of the cheating already happening, like the feelings from Little having feelings for both Emil and Rafaela, and then to add on top of that the fact that Rafaela also has feelings for her brother and her, it was too many people having feelings for too many people.
Right.
But I will say, that's teenagerdom, for me at least.
Yeah.
I liked everybody all the time.
Are you wrong? No.
And I mean, like, what am I going to say about myself on the internet today?
The constant struggle.
I know. Do you want me to continue talking while you decide?
Well, no, I'll just say, like, my brother and I were in the same classes, like, we're a year apart, and I was discovering my sexuality in high school, you know, and, like, there may have been a girl that I liked that he had already liked.
Oh.
It's not as unrealistic as you may think.
Well, I know that that's not unrealistic.
Yeah, it's not.
Okay, you know what else is interesting? We were, I know Chelsea at least mentioned the ages of these characters. And, like, in general, I read these characters way older than they were. So then the way that they're acting seemed really immature to me, even though they're actually in high school. Like, probably their immaturity matches their age for sure. But I was reading them as college age. You've got a girl in a dorm, even though I know that it's a high school dorm. But you had a girl in a dorm. You have drinking every other page. Like, they're going to parties. They're getting hammered all the time.
Even if I knew it was high school, I thought it was college.
Yeah.
Like, 3 quarters into the novel, I suddenly remembered, and I was like, oh,
Yeah, it for sure feels like if these characters, it makes it feel like she wrote this book and the publishers went, this won't sell, make them younger. That's how it feels to me, because the things that they're going through with the dorming, and how, like, she gets together with her first girlfriend ever, like, all of that felt very college. And then the parties and stuff also felt very frat boy party feeling.
Yeah.
I feel like if she wrote this now, she probably would have aged up. I just think that at the time that this book came out, there wasn't as much of a push for college-aged YA.
Yeah, definitely.
And, like, her newer book, Finding Yvonne, she's 18 out of high school, I think. Or, like, she's just about to graduate, like, doing college stuff.
Right. Yeah,
I think feel of that the whole time, and it easily could have been that.
Yeah.
For sure.
Hello, my turtle dove.
How did you guys feel about all the drinking? Did you have feelings about it?
It didn't faze me. But I also partied in high school, so.
I don't think it's unrealistic.
No, I don't think so either.
But I don't think it's unrealistic.
I think what bothered me about it was how often Little's narration had to tell us that she doesn't do this all the time.
Yeah.
What was the most unrealistic for me is that they kept driving from, like, East LA to the Valley, and I was like, no one does that. Like, that wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
If you're in East LA, you do not have friends from Studio City. I'm sorry, but you just don't.
I even know that, and I don't live in proper LA.
Like, I live in the Valley now, where they were talking about that one party they went to in Studio City, and like the story takes place in my hometown. I never go home. It's too far. Like, that wouldn't happen. Dot. You would not go to Highland Park.
I think with all the, at least personally for me, and this is kind of a segue into, like,
let's do it
aspects, but I thought with all of the substance use that was going on, like, they mention it a little bit, how Lion, can't partake originally because of his meds, but I had an issue with it because it's not just, like, medicated bipolar people who would have an issue with substances. Like, not all people with bipolar have substance issues, but some do, and it can be a symptom. And so, like, like, when he smoked a bunch of weed, like, it could have been discussed, like, because it easily, when he has that episode, it could have been the weed that, like, kicked him into an episode. that personally hasn't happened to me just because I don't smoke, but I have friends with bipolar also who it literally can kick them into an episode. Like they have such bad experiences with weed that like they don't do it at all because, you know, meds or not, like that substance really affects their condition. And there were like things like that, opportunities like that to talk about the intricacies of bipolar that were never really like, it was like the whole narrative kind of hinged on his illness. It was a lot of the plot points of the book, and yet the true nuance of how a person can go through that wasn't there. And I get that it was kind of because we were watching him from someone else's perspective, but I found myself multiple times throughout the book thinking how much more effective this story would have been if his perspective was in the book. I mean, the book is called Little and Lion, so it could have easily been a dual perspective novel, and we could have gotten more of that nuance into it. But as it was, just listening to little thoughts without lines to balance them really irritated me. Like to listen to the thoughts of someone who essentially has kind of this like savior complex over their sibling. Like, it's realistic, but like towards the end, like my rating dropped off so harshly because you could tell that Colbert had a agenda with bipolar in this book that was solely to say that like the only way to manage is medication. And I totally accept that that is accurate for many people. But as someone with bipolar 2, which that was part of this book that I really enjoyed, like bipolar 2 isn't often like called out as its own thing, and it is its own thing. Hypomania was used, loved that, because that's what I deal with. So I was like, oh my gosh, finally someone like making the distinction between these two different types. But when it was constantly other people outside of Lion talking about how like he just doesn't know what's best for him, and you know, like he, you know, we should just force him to do this and all this stuff, it like all came to a head. There's this specific part I should have tabbed where Saul, his father, is talking about why he has full custody of Lion, and talks about his mother Daphne, who has cyclothymia, which is a milder mood disorder, and how she doesn't want treatment, and basically saying, I can't understand, you know, how someone would reject something that can make their life more stable. Like, and I was like, no one gives a fuck about your opinion, dude. Like, literally not your thing. And like, I get wanting, people should get treatment, but there are a lot of options. At the end of the day, it just came across fully as like, you know, basically someone with bipolar shouldn't have autonomy. Like when Rafaela and Suzette have that conversation where Rafaela says, I didn't like when people told me what I had to do with my body. So, you know, I didn't want to do that to him. And then she's like, but I guess it's different. And Suzette's like, yeah, basically it is. I was like, whoa, you can't just leave it there. You essentially just said Lion shouldn't be able to like decide what happens to him. Like he shouldn't have autonomy. And I was like, that's unacceptable for someone who, like, you know, who knows where my journey will go. You know, the prognosis isn't good. It, you know, the outlook is that it gets worse. So who knows? Maybe one day I'll be taking medication. And if I need it, then I will. Like, if I have to take it, I will. I'm not a proponent of, like, don't do it, go cold turkey, like, forget about it. But it's really distressing to me to see, like, no discussion of any other options. There's so many different types of treatment. There's so many different ways to be a support system for someone with a mood disorder. And so for all of it to hinge upon the fact that he didn't want to take his meds and everyone else was like, that was literally the only problem. They weren't looking at any of the other facets of the issue. And so it really irritated me because I was like, I related so much to this character, but then you made it all only about this one part of the illness. And then I was like very distressed to hear that they essentially didn't want him to have autonomy. You know, like I get that like sometimes there can be a blurred line of like sometimes you just have to like help someone when they're in a crisis. But if you like pour that out into their whole life when they're trying to make a decision, because the fact is there is risks with taking medication. There are risks with going without. Both are risky. Both are going to have physical, you know, side effects, physical risks. You could die both ways. That's at the end of the day, you're risking your life, you're risking your physical health both ways, just in different ways. And so to like pretend that it's not a big decision for someone who has this to choose one over the other, and that everyone else knows best, and that like this way is just better, is really, you know, I found it really alienating and distressing. And I think it would have not been that way if, first of all, the author had the illness themselves, and second of all, if it was dual perspective and she did more research. Because I feel like that is the same reason the hearing aid thing happened. It was just, there was not in-depth enough research for these things to get the nuance they deserved. And it really jumped out at me with the bipolar. And you probably saw my tweet. I literally tweeted right after I finished the book. I was like, just remember, people with mental illnesses deserve autonomy. Because I was really, I don't know. I don't like the suggestion that the other people in my life should be able to tell me which way I'm going to risk my life today. Like, you know, like I have friends on that and they swear by them, and I'm happy for them. And I think they should deserve the right to that healthcare and that option. But I also deserve the right to treat it the way I want to treat it, through therapy, through whatever I want to do. And you just can't, you can't nix one or the other, because my friends also deal with slurred speech because of their medication and seizures and, you know, like all this stuff. So like, I don't know, it just felt like a vast oversimplification.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like in general, our like society already has a bias. Like our society is very into meds. They work, they fix it, and then you're done. And then like they don't talk about, I mean, I'm talking, obviously doctors like have to tell you the side effects, but generally your doctor's going to tell you to go on meds. And like generally everyone around you is going to be like, well, if there's a medication that can fix you, then use it. And they're not like, there's generally an idea that like, oh, quick fix, here it is. Don't worry about whatever else is involved in that. And it's really interesting, working in Social Security, I hear all of the people who come in with their arguments for disability, and I have to listen to them, you know, tell their stories or whatever. And one of the rules for you to get on disability is being med compliant. Like if you have schizoaffective disorder and you're hallucinating, but you're not ever taking your meds, they can say, I'm not giving you disability because we don't know if you would still have the disability if you were taking your meds. And same thing with like things that are related to drug and alcohol abuse. If there's evidence that if you weren't using alcohol or using the drug of choice, like meth or whatever, if you weren't using those and there's evidence that would fix you being sober, then they won't give it to you. So like, but those people are still struggling.
We lost you for a sec. Cassie. Cassandra. She's frozen.
I'm here.
Oh, there she is. A little bit. You're back. I'm so sorry. If it makes you feel better, we got most of that.
Yeah, and it was good.
Yes, we did get most of it.
I guess it's just crazy to me that like people who have those, whatever the situation is, like they're still going through something, but then because they're not med compliant or because they are using a drug or whatever, which is also a disease, then you can't get help from the government specifically. And so it's
just a way of holding people with mental illnesses hostage, because not only, like, for me, I'm really adamantly opposed to meds personally, not for anyone else. I want to be very clear about that because I know they help people, but personally, I'm very against them and I don't want them. And so to have other people like tell you what you have to do with your body is incredibly violating. And I think that Rafaela, when she brought that up, like that was like an important like moment, that she then turned very sour to say, oh no, you did deserve autonomy, but he doesn't. And I think we do this with people with mental illnesses way too often. And yeah, you're right. Like, I know a lot of people understand that it's not a quick fix. And also there's a nuance of bipolar doesn't affect everyone the exact same way. So some people might have an easier time treating with other methods, whereas others might have, you know, bipolar that presents in ways that are super, super incredibly, like, almost impossibly difficult to handle without medication. So, like, no two people with the illness are going to be the same. So you can't treat it all the same. You can't say this one thing has to be the solution for every single person, but that's how it was presented. And, you know, like, they kind of talked about it, but not really. Like, the side effects are severe. Like, there are people who go on, you know, certain meds and they help them keep stable for 20 years and then they have to go off of it because their liver can't survive it anymore. That's a literal, I was reading Rock Steady, which is a like graphic novel about how to kind of keep yourself steady when you have bipolar. And she was talking about how she was on this specific medication for 20 years. And she went in and they were like, hey, so we ran some tests. You can't stay on this. You will die. And she's like, okay, well, how am I supposed to function when I've functioned for 20 years with this same medication and now I cannot take it because it will kill me? And now I have to go through all of this again, this, you know, trial and error. And it's an agonizing process. And although it helps people, because the opposite is also, you know, agonizing a lot of the time, like, you just can't force someone into one lane or the other. That's the bottom line, is that you should not say that that person cannot choose the treatment route they take. That's not real support. And there's something to be said about like her, you know, keeping that a secret when he has chosen that path. But
I will say that, like, my opinion on that part, like, he should have been doing that with his therapist, in my opinion. Like, him just deciding to quit cold turkey and not tell anybody who's, especially, like, he's a kid. So, and again, like, it would have been amazing to have his point of view, because, yeah, it would have been amazing to have his point of view, period. But, like, he's still going through the process of getting his meds changed and stuff. And so, like, if he had talked to his therapist about why he didn't want to be on meds and, like, talked to her about what he was feeling side effect wise, then perhaps they could have come to some sort of way to get him off the meds in a way that wasn't just like cold turkey and with observation, you know, like, yeah, you can go off your meds, but we're going to work with you on this and that treatment to make sure we're trying to control stuff. Like, Brandy Colbert didn't write this therapist into the story, so we don't know if she's a good or a bad one. There are plenty of good and bad psychiatrists, so who the fuck knows if his was good or bad. But, like, if she was a good one, he could have done that in a healthy and safe way rather than doing it in a secretive way and putting all of the responsibility on his sister, who's also a kid. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
There is something to be said about codependence. Like, that is not completely unrealistic, especially in that situation.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. It's not, like, it's not. Yeah. But at the same time, I agree. It would have been, I get, like, people do go cold turkey off their meds, and you shouldn't. But I think, like, part of that issue was that his parents really and his psychiatrist didn't really give him that choice in the first place. And so then he found himself in this position where he was desperate to be off of them. You know, many people feel awful when they're on them, and so they don't want them anymore. So like, yeah, and that is.
And I don't know what kind of. Yeah, but and I don't know what kind of like laws. What is the when you're 16 or 17 with bipolar disorder and your parents want you on meds, do you have the right to disagree with them? Like, I don't know, because, you know, for girls talking about birth control, that's now 100%, at least in California, that's 100% the girl's choice. You can't do a pap smear, you can't do anything regarding a girl's body and regarding her girl parts without her consent. It doesn't matter what the parents want. But I don't know what kind of laws there are for kids with mental health stuff. Like, I don't know.
Was that, sorry, I was just going to say that his dad actually brought that up. The part you were talking about with autonomy, which I know what part you're talking about, where he's talking about his mom, which I did actually really like, because the less severe forms of bipolar aren't usually talked about, just in general. And just really quick, I want to say that not as somebody that has it, so, you know, I obviously can't say, but just as somebody that's a psych major that's studied a lot on the disorder, I felt like for young readers particularly, that it was a very comprehensive look, just in general, at sort of what you could expect. You know what I mean? Not like they just run off and go crazy, and, you know, that how it's been portrayed in media before. I felt like this was a lot more realistic. But anyway, I felt like they had a really good opportunity to bring up that he could have brought it up with his parents, and worked his way through and off of them if that's something he wanted to do. And I feel like, I honestly genuinely feel like she was just sort of like in over her head.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I do like that they mentioned that his mother had it, because it is a lot of the time hereditary.
Yes, 100%. Like,
right.
It runs completely in my mom's side of the family, and almost all the time, like, someone has it.
Yeah, exactly.
But like, I think part of that is also because the only stories I've read in YA that have bipolar characters in them are not own voices. Like, I haven't read a single YA book by an own voices bipolar author. And like, even just the fact that, like, his episodes wind up being plot points.
Right.
The denouement of this story is him having a hypomanic episode. And it's not even his story. It just, it hurts to see that be used as an event for the story, as opposed to fully, like, explored. And some of the ways Suzette talks about him, like, for me, I get that some other bipolar people may not identify like this, but me personally, I would never want someone to say, like, that's not the Rhiannon. That's not Rhiannon right now. Like, that's, like, to, like, separate me out so that they can deny one part of, like, who I am, as that's the bipolar. So, like, none of that is her. So I'm just going to, like, dehumanize her when she's going through an episode. Like, I understand that it's good to have, like, empathy, to know that, like, that person is not necessarily thinking at full capacity. So, like, maybe have some grace with them, but to actually fully say that's not them is just denial. Like, that's fully just, like, rejecting their personhood in that moment, which then makes it easier for you to take their autonomy away from them when you think that part of the time they're just not a fully, like, human person. I don't know. It felt a little dehumanizing at those parts when she was describing him as these different people. It's like, no, I'm one full person who experiences these episodes. This isn't three Rhiannons, like, having, you know, this whole different time, or three lions having this whole different, you know. So some of the language even used was kind of I don't know. I do think one thing I did enjoy of the portrayal, other than the fact that it was bipolar 2, and they talked about some of those like specific things, and that cyclothymia was in there because that like is never said. But the other scene that I enjoyed, just because I particularly related with it, was the scene where he turns around and says, "We're done. If you tell them you're not my sibling, we're not even related, so fuck you gonna do about it."
That part hurt me so bad.
It hurts, but
Yeah.
it sucks as someone who has bipolar 2 to watch that scene happen. It sucks as someone who's been on the receiving end, I'm sure. But I identify with it because that is often how it will come out for me. My brain just goes immediately to what I know will hurt that person the most. And I'm like, bam, target acquired. And then you just take the person out and like, you don't mean it. He doesn't mean it. I'm like that it comes back around to like, everyone knows he didn't mean it. Mm-hmm. And he apologizes still because you still have to take responsibility for having said it. But it's such a like realistic outburst to have. Like, cause I felt in that moment, I was like, I know exactly what it feels like to go into that mode and just totally try to destroy someone that you love more than anyone else. Like, you can't imagine, like, I felt like that part in particular stood out as a realistic, like,
it was realistic. But the reason that scene hurt so bad is because I have step parents. I don't have step siblings. I have half siblings, but I have step parents on both sides. And so, like, her being in a they're not technically married, but a remarried family with all of these different people who are family not by blood, but through marriage, essentially, even though they're not married. Having him say that, like, really roughed me up emotionally because I've never had my step parents say anything like that to me, but like there's been, it's smaller nuances that I've experienced with extended family sometimes. And so for the stepbrother to say that to the stepsister who they're so close and stuff, like, oh, that was emotional and like it was realistic. I'm not saying it wasn't. It just hurt. It hurts.
Well, it's painful. It's painful on either side because like I don't like constantly having to like come up against the idea that like I'm capable of this and I actively have done this and probably will again like that, and I hate hurting the people I love. Like you don't want to do that, so like it is bad and hurtful all the way around, but very realistic in that. And I have an adopted stepsister that like, and my mom is not with her mom anymore, so like it's a whole other like layer of like, but now we're separated again, so like it's so weird. But like so like I would hate to think that I could ever say something like that to her, but like the things I like, I don't want to get overly personal, but I guess we're already there. But like even a son, like my fiance, who I love more than anybody other than probably my siblings, the things you would say, like, oh, I know that he doesn't like to be seen as weak because he's very like a very sensitive person. So what am I going to say? You're pathetic. You're weak. Get out of my face. You can't handle my anger because you're pathetic. Like, and that's horrible. Why would you say that to someone when you know that's the very thing they're insecure about? But like that, it's like red and you have just this little target in the center and you're like, okay, well, I know how to effectively annihilate the threat, get them to stop hassling me. This is the most effective and quick way to get rid of this thing that is bothering me. And you don't even, and so it's horrifying. Like it's a horrifying thing to know that you're capable of something so cruel. But and then to see the aftermath and to know that like nothing will excuse the fact that you said something like that, and all you can do is apologize and like hope for the best next time. Like, and so it's very realistic but very, very painful.
Yeah, it was painful. That scene.
I wanted to say, like, I don't have a ton of constructive to add because I'm like listening and learning, but I just want to say I really appreciate your perspective. Like, I appreciate that you're giving this to us because, like, what we talked about before we went live, like, it's really I'm appreciating seeing your perspective and your take, and like the first time I read this book, I saw so much of myself in it, and it was just like an emotional 5 stars because like I had dealt so much with so much of the stuff that happened in this book. But like that was 2 years ago now that I read it, and it was like right around the time that I was like first kind of like coming out or like being comfortable like labeling my sexuality, and also like some family stuff that like whatever. But looking back now and rereading it now in like the 2 years that it's been since I first read it, and like I've learned so much in that time, and like plus with your perspective, like it really is opening my eyes, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the nuance.
Thank you.
And you're just always, Rhiannon is always so willing to like talk about your experience and stuff, just online in general. So.
Yeah, I want to say that I really appreciate that, because and not, you know, for sake of I guess I don't really know how to add this in any way with grace, but my partner has also dealt with a lot of very similar issues, and I've been on the receiving end of you know, really hard situations for him where he feels cornered and feels like he needs to manipulate me or say, you know what I mean, and say certain things just to sort of like end the situation. And I saw a lot of that in Lionel, and I, you know, and hearing you talk about it, it's sort of like a, you know, it's like, you know, but it's still like hearing somebody that actually has been through it saying it is still a lot more like, and granted, no, not everybody is the same, but you know they don't mean it, but you know, just hearing how much sort of like it hurts the other person to say it when it's not the person, you know what I mean? Because then you're like, wait, are you manipulating me by saying that it hurts you to say that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
No,
like,
I totally get it.
okay.
Yeah, because to hear that it is like a symptom that other people deal with, if differently, but like it's still something.
Right.
Like it validates that it's a symptom. Like this is a legitimate thing that other people also go through, and that's not to invalidate being on the receiving end of it. Like I try really hard not to invalidate Esteban or invalidate my brother or invalidate anyone, because, you know, even though it hurts me to know that I've done that to them, it hurts me to know that I'm capable of can exist at the same time that I know that I have control in that moment, or I, you know, am sad that I did it. So like both of those things can exist at the same time, and like, you know, you can reconcile it and apologize and, you know, move on, but it doesn't mean that any one person has to give up their hurt to the other person's hurt.
Right.
Or, you know, knowing why. It doesn't mean that like both of you can't.
Rhiannon
Which
froze,
is-
I think.
Yeah.
Or was it just me? Oh.
No, it was you're back, I think.
Oh no, is she still frozen?
No, she's like this. So I assume she's frozen.
She's trying to dab.
Welcome back.
Dang it.
The curse has
Just having such a... Oh, there you go.
Am I back?
Yeah.
We missed... Yeah.
Although we should probably start
It's just
trying to wrap
a-
up soon.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
We should start trying to wrap up soon.
Okay, sorry.
Can we end on a positive, something like that we really liked
Yes,
about it?
I can start.
Yeah, okay, you start.
This was one of the first books that I read. Like I said, this is a reread, so this is my second time reading it. But the first time I read this, I have never in my life felt so seen by a book. And like, as we've clearly discussed, like this book is not without its issues, but it's set in my hometown. It's about a girl figuring out her sexuality. You know, like just so much of this hit me so close. And like, I'm always going to have such a fondness for it, even though like I've kind of woken myself up to some of the issues within it, but I still will always have such a powerful connection to it. And I'm happy that it exists. Also, I love gay shit.
What did you say? I missed it.
The whole thing, or just the I love gay shit?
No, just the last thing.
I said I love gay shit.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's all I missed.
I wrote it in there, the chat for you too, so it'll live in infamy.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, I agree. I think my favorite thing was also just like watching Little's like finding her sexuality and like the struggles that she had with it. Because I definitely was that girl in high school. Like I didn't know how to understand, like, I like boys, but now I like this girl. Is this just one girl, or is this general? Like I had that same conversation in my own head. So I really liked getting to watch that. And then randomly, I also really loved that he went to San Luis Obispo because I knew exactly the area, and that was really fun for me.
I guess I'll go next.
Sure.
I actually went on and on about like parts that I found issues with, but I actually did really enjoy the experience of reading this book. And for a good portion of it, I was like really on board and really loved it. And part of it is the sexuality portions, which I also enjoyed for the most part outside of like Rafaela's whole thing. I enjoyed the discovery of, oh, I could be bi. What does this look like? You know, my discovery I fell for a girl and then like had 4 years where I went back, like I regressed because someone told me it was a phase and it threw me back.
I had the exact same experience.
Yeah, and so then you have to like discover it all over again. And it's tough, but I think this like shortened that struggle up a little bit, but like was still very poignant. But I loved all the representation. Again, like just being able to see so many parts of myself in a novel, not usual. And then I loved the Shabbat dinners with the challah and the kaboosh and all of the like, I loved
the challah bread.
I loved it. I loved it. I just had little butterflies that whole time, which was probably one of my favorite parts. Yeah, I think if it had just like had maybe fewer characters, it actually would have been like in a little more nuance. But
totes fair.
I liked it a lot.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Haley.
I really liked all the representation. I felt like it was very realistic. And I liked almost all the characters, to be honest with you. I really liked their parents' relationship. I felt like it displayed a really healthy relationship. I really liked Lionel, to be honest. I liked his progression, and I liked that you could tell he like really, really wanted to just sort of feel okay, but wasn't sure how to go about that. I really liked that. And I honestly really liked all the love interests. Like, Iris sounded like a dreamboat and a half. Like, love her. Okay, she was so understanding and, like, just there for her. Like, we love Iris, okay?
I wish Iris was the main female of it.
Yes. And I liked Rafaela a lot, too. Like, I really, really liked her. I wish there wouldn't have been the her with Lionel thing because I just loved her so much. And I also really liked Emil. Like,
yeah, Emil was great.
I love him.
I feel like we didn't give him enough love. He gets he deserves the love.
It's just so easy to talk about.
So understanding. They were all so good to her, and like, just you do you, like, we're here for you when you got it figured out. And I was like, okay, but where do I find me any of y'all?
And the parent too. Like,
I know. I do really. I thought the parent rep was amazing because you don't see that a lot in YA. They're always absent, not paying attention or whatever. And these parents were so involved and like also not bad for each other.
Yes, I know. I love their marriage.
Love them.
Did I forget?
No, what? Hey?
Yeah.
Characters on point.
Yeah. All right.
This slideshow is horrible because of
I don't know what happened.
Well,
I'm
I've
sorry.
had a great time. So if this is a bad example, like
I don't know. I thought that I froze, and then I think I interrupted something.
No, you didn't.
Oh.
You're just pixels right now, but we love you anyway.
Dang it!
So disorienting to be frozen and like come back in and not know what's happening.
Yes.
It's like the caveman SpongeBob meme. Like,
Accurate. All right, is this a wrap?
I think so. I think I'm allergic to my face makeup. I've been trying not to scratch. So,
Will you
Wash.
yeah,
will you
that's what I
do
was going to say. Huh?
Will you do the reminders?
Oh,
For
reminder. The book for the Sassy Book Club pick for March is going to be The Lies of Blockamora by Scott Lynch. The live show for that is most likely going to be on Friday, March 29th. If you would like to be a co-host of that, let us know. We possibly have some slots open, maybe, depending on people's schedules. But it will, again, be The Lies of Blockamora by Scott Lynch, most likely Friday, the 29th of March.
On Chelsea's channel.
On my channel, which is interesting because it's fantasy. If you would like a free copy, it's available. The audiobook is available on Hoopla. If your library
Yeah, I'm
supports
listening
Hoopla.
to it right now. Because I started early because it's really long. It's a 21-hour audiobook.
But
That's
free
valid.
on Hoopla.
Love that. Or like go to your library, they probably have it also if you like.
Yeah.
physical books.
It
Always-
came out.
Yeah.
It's an old book, so you could probably get a copy
hopefully-
pretty easily.
Yeah.
Or probably like at your used bookstore, mass market paperback section.
Probably.
You know.
Nice book.
But your girl's gonna read adult fantasy. We'll see how this goes.
So proud.
So proud.
I'm excited. I feel like I need to give fantasy the time it deserves. So I'm gonna like buy some bath bombs and hang out in the tub with it for a couple hours. See how it goes.
I also would recommend you like listen while you read it. Like get
That's
the
my
Hoopla.
plan. That's my plan.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
Yeah. I'm thinking about starting a new series. Well, just a little teaser. I think I'm gonna start a series on my channel about reading fantasy
Oh,
and seeing
that's fun.
if I can find what kind of fantasy I like.
I'm
But-
you liked that. Didn't you like Sawkill Girls? I think that was the last one I saw you read.
Yeah, but that one to me, like, because it's somewhat ground in reality. That's what works for me.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to do like hard fantasy. Like I'm trying to see if I can make like high fantasy wizard shit work. We'll see.
I'm about to take on Once and Future King by T.H. White, and I'm stoked. Because I keep reading, like, anyway, Arthurian stuff. Just the fantasy will just launch us into a whole nother discussion.
Are you gonna read Once and Future?
I
By Amy
already
Rose Cadden. Oh, you read it?
Yes.
Oh, that's good. I have the arc. I need to read it.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. And the next book is the premise for it. I'm just so excited.
Okay, that makes me more excited to read it. Because, like, we all know my arc shelf is out of control.
It's so clear. Like, so
I love that. I love that. Awesome. Okay, we've changed the subject now. Is there anything I'm missing, Cassie? She's frozen.
it's gone.
She looks great, though. It's a really good still. She looks sassy.
I can hear you guys like hear what you're saying.
Welcome back.
Are we ready to close?
I think so. We should probably just be done because we're a mess.
Okay. All right.
We love you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you so much, Rhiannon and Hailey, for hanging out with us and giving us your insights. Very much appreciated. Thank you to those of you that read along with us. We love you. I don't know what Cassie was saying.
We love you.
Yeah, but we love you. I'm going to speak for both of us and say good night. Thanks for hanging out.
Bye.
Bye. How do I go?